Welcome everybody to the Sim Grid and welcome to Season 2 of the Endurance Cup. We're here for the second round of the championship. It doesn't seem like a minute since we were at Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, but now we move on to a new staple in the Assetto Corsa Competizione and GT World Challenge World, the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari, also lovingly known as Imola. My name is Chaz Draycott. Alongside me today is Connall Courtney. And, well, Connall, a new circuit on this sim is going to provide a very big challenge for a lot of these drivers because they've not had all the time in the world to get ready for this, have they?
Ever since it was announced as DLC, we have been looking forward to this. I know Michael Hamlet was very pumped up in chat earlier on, as we all are. It's going to be a very interesting challenge. These guys, as you said, Chaz, won't have the experience as they've had on previous tracks. I've seen a few of them. I've seen quite a lot of them in daily races with the Sim Grid, trying to get some form of track time and some form of race experience here, but it should present a very interesting challenge indeed.
It certainly will. Plenty of horrible curbs and very tight, twisty corners around this circuit. There you can see Agua Minerale, unbelievably difficult corner as you're on the brake going uphill. Variante Alta, the chicane at the top of the hill, some very big hefty curbs there as well. And a lot of runoff area here at Imola, which you would think provides quite a bit of relaxation around a lap where you can just think, oh, I'll just run wide a little bit. But of course, the discussion of track limits is always going to be something we go over today, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a big thing here. The track limits are quite tricky, especially now what we're looking at. This section here, Aqua Minerale, it's going to be very difficult to stay consistent over the course of the 4 hours. And of course, as we all know, track limits don't just relate to the driver, it relates to the whole car. So if one of your drivers gets 3 track limit warnings, you get one as a drive-through penalty for the team.
Does indeed. And of course, there are a lot of changes that have been made to this circuit over time. The famous Tamburello corner, which was the scene of a lot of accidents in its time, very, very long, fast, sweeping left-hander, has now been turned into a chicane. You've got chicanes here at the top of the hill, which have sort of been there all along, but there's other parts of the circuit that are designed just to slow the cars down a little bit more. And interestingly, I'm not sure how you feel about this, Connall, but you can see there the straight on the left-hand side, which does still get used for some events, I believe. Bike racing around here uses that chicane, but the old sort of final corner, as it was, which was a chicane just before the start-finish line, used to be a very entertaining bit of circuit, especially in the Formula One, but now we've got this incredibly long, sort of not quite straight, back straight, well, main straight, down the front. And I think I prefer the chicane. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Obviously, the World Superbikes here, they still use that chicane. It's very, very narrow, but it also leads to some interesting dive bombs in the last lap, or, well, for most cases, the first lap. But yeah, it's an interesting one. It does set it up. I mean, it's very difficult when you go down into Ravazza to get a pass and make it stick. So for Ravazza to essentially be the last corner, it eliminates that chance of last corner antics in comparison to the final chicane that we once had. But in saying that, with or without the chicane, it is still such a stunning circuit.
Really is. It's a big favourite for a lot of people. And, well, one thing that you can certainly enjoy around Imola is the sound of a Ferrari. And what we're going to do is jump on board with a Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo. And our very own Connall Courtney is going to take us around a hot lap.
Here we go. So, Imola in the Ferrari, absolutely beautiful. We'll run down this straight. As we were just talking about, there was always a chicane to the left there. We are not using it. It is just a straight line, well, relatively straight line. Bit of a curve here, it counts as a corner, but let's face it, it's not really a corner as we head down into Tamburello. Difficult to get right, especially with these sausage curbs on the inside of both sections. Gregor Schill manages it beautifully. It's going to be a tricky one, especially if you're trying to make a pass in there to make the block pass, because of course we have the switch over direction as we head into Villeneuve now. Another tricky one, easy to dip your toes into the gravel just there on the exit, and then the toes of chicane, or hairpin, excuse me, as we try and get almost a double apex. You can go for it and run up the hill. Crucial to get that run up the hill. If you slack or ruin your drive up through there, you're going to have a tough time maintaining your position here as we head into Piratella, getting the run down through possibly one of the trickiest sections of track in world racing. Aqua Minerale here, you're at lean, you're at angle, you're braking and you're trying to get the run uphill again. There's the track limits, which will be potentially crucial to a couple of teams' races, as track limits are very tricky to stay consistent through Aqua Minerale. Variante Alta now, the chicane that you can use a lot of the sausage curve in. And we will see maybe a couple of teams skyrocketing themselves over those sausage curves if they get it a little wrong. Down into Ravazza was essentially the last corner to make a pass on this circuit. Very tricky to make the pass, but it can be done. We've seen these guys make passes where we didn't expect them, and then getting a run out again, you can easily dip the wheel into the gravel there as we go down what is essentially a straight. 16 and 17 it is on a track map, but it is a straight line, and that is a lap from Gregor Schill in the Ferrari.
Wonderful sounding machine as well. The Ferrari certainly does make a very distinct noise, but it's such a tough circuit. And I mentioned the curbs before, didn't I? The chicanes sometimes have anti-cut little sausage curbs on the inside. You can see them there at the first couple of corners at the Tamburello chicane. If you hit one of those, especially in a chicane like Tamburello, it's like a 3-part chicane, isn't it? It can really upset your lines from one part of the corner to the next.
Yeah, exactly that. And these sausage curves also will have a big effect. We'll probably see it, especially on the first lap, with people battling for position, taking, let's say, not the racing line. And when you don't take the racing line into some of these chicanes, that means you basically have to straight line over some of these sausage curves. And from experience, Chaz, in some of the SimGrid daily races, I find myself to be just a little bit airborne over some of these sausage curves.
Yeah, it certainly is easy to attack them, but it's always good to go out and learn where the limits are, really, with a circuit like this, because when you're racing on it, other than where we're looking at now, as Louis Fly flies down the straight, it's actually a very narrow track as well. Overtaking here and lapping traffic as well is going to be very difficult, because with it being so narrow, it really does become a momentum circuit. There's a lot of corners where there's only one line really going around there. An interesting other point to make as well is that we have the Mercedes-AMG GT3 Evo joining us this season. So you can see that some of these drivers are now in the newer updated Mercedes, the anglerfish as I call it, with the huge gob on the front of it. Look at how evil that car is. Saw them at Nürburgring in September, and my God, they are pretty machines. And they go well as well, they sound good, and it's just an all-round fantastic, aggressive-looking car. And this is your current fastest in free practice. This is Lars Kissert in the Ambassadors for Renvelten in the 999 car. He's actually just pulled over to the side of the circuit, decides that lap is not worth chasing anymore, and then becomes a BMW M6 as he jumps into the pits. Here is Alberto Garcia for Odox Motorsport. Nice livery on that car, actually. It looks like what we'd call a realistic livery, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Very Darth Vader-esque when you look at the front of that car, isn't it? It's just menacing, as you said, Chaz. But yeah, the Merc Evos and also the Ferrari Evos participating in this race, so very interesting to monitor how they go. Of course, in between the first race of the season at Catalunya and here at Imola, we have the option for these teams to switch car, and most of the switches have been basically from Ferrari 488 to Ferrari 488 Evo, so there haven't been many manufacturer changes as such. But yeah, so most of the guys are still run the same manufacturers. We thought we were going to see a few more. I've seen actually a couple of teams drivers in some of the daily races around here testing out some of the other manufacturers, so maybe doing some gathering some data. But just looking down the entry list, it doesn't look like there's been many manufacturer changes, and that would make sense. You know, you start off the season, you've done obviously a lot of preparation for the start of the season. You don't want to be changing manufacturer and having to do all that prep work again midway through the season, or at least in the season. So yeah, it makes sense. We didn't expect many changes, and most of them have just been upgrades to Evo spec. Yeah,
they have indeed. And the Ferrari, I mean, the Ferrari made a joke themselves about the fact that you couldn't really tell a visual difference from the usual 488 GT3 to the 488 GT3 Evo. One of the only noticeable differences for me was that the exhausts used to be round on the original car, and now they're like this sort of flattened oval shape. It looks like someone's just hit them from both sides with a hammer. And, well, I think actually Assetto Corsa Competizione has had the oval exhaust in the whole time. So, interesting little poke of me saying they got it wrong there, but I don't think they did. You know, some of the teams I've noticed have had that before, but that's just me being nerdy. Now, we've got the cars out on track then for qualifying. Obviously, this is the qualifying stream. We have the race stream coming up not long after this, and then we will have 4 hours of incredible racing around here. Looking at the Lexus at the moment, the number 94 machine Arnaud Visagier, as he goes up out of tow. So you can see them trying to get the temperature in the tyres. Only 12 degrees track temperature here at this point, Connall, so it's not going to be easy for him to get this right, is it?
Yeah, it's a cool one. It's 8 o'clock in the evening in game time, so I think that's, it's not the line. If you watch the hot lap, that is not the line that Gregor Schill used. But expect the Lexus to be strong here. They have had good performances in any Imola races that I've seen. Of course, it turns very well at Lexus, but again, how will it manage the tyres? Well, if you've joined us for the Catalunya race, you'll hear my gripe with the Lexus and not being able to make the tyres work. But it seemed to work quite well for most of the Lexus teams. They were able to last longer than I could on the Lexus with the tyre management. So it's clearly something I'm doing and not the car. But we do know that the Lexus is notoriously harsher on tyres than some of the other cars. How will that have an effect? And of course, we don't really know because not many of these teams have done this sort of length. In fact, I don't know if any have done this sort of length around Imola so far.
Yeah, I was going to say, top of the broadcast, one of the first things we mentioned is the fact that with this being a new circuit to Assetto Corsa Competizione, it takes out any sort of advantage that a team or driver could have of saying, oh, I've done loads of laps around there, because a lot of these teams and drivers will know that this event was coming up, and they'll think, right, well, we need to get some laps in around Imola, so everybody will be pushing hard to make sure that they have their techniques perfected, their lines perfected, setups perfected, everything just absolutely spot on. We're looking at the TX3 HCR Bentley here of Valentin Barrier. Still one of my favourite racing driver names ever. And again, this is another car that is a large machine. It looks like it should weigh a lot more than the other cars, but it just simply doesn't. It sounds fantastic as well as we go on board. Humongous big beefy V8 in these Bentleys. But again, I think the Lexus being harsh on its tyres, just coming back to that, may be down to the size, because the weight distribution is over all 4 corners, isn't it?
Yeah, so that could be actually a big factor. But it could also be me driving the ever-loving life out of it. Could be a big factor in the way I have tyre troubles. But it doesn't seem to be too much of a problem. And Barcelona, to be honest, Barcelona was going to be the track. If you were going to demolish a set of tyres, Barcelona was that track. I mean, you think of those long looping corners, turn 3 especially, is just a tyre shredder. So if the teams there didn't really have many tyre issues, then hopefully for Imola they shouldn't have any issues going forward.
Yeah, we'll have to see. It's going to be an interesting one either way, because there's a bit of an unknown factor here for a lot of these guys. Here's the Energy Racing Team Mercedes, one of my favourite liveries on the grid. Looks absolutely wonderful. Very bright yellow. There's a lot of energy gone into it, you could say. Certainly does stand out amongst other cars. And apparently it's an in-game livery. Apologies,
why do we keep doing this?
Honestly, I do this all the time. I've just had Mike Yao in my ear. Now, I must admit, I'm not up to date with all these liveries and things that go on. I'm really not, I'm afraid. I'll have to admit that. But at the same time, we can appreciate a good one, can't we, Connall? We know what looks good and what doesn't.
Yeah, I feel like we've done a disservice to the people who've spent a lot of time working on their liveries and getting it right for these races, because I picked in-game livery as my favourite livery at Catalunya, and now we've been singing the praises of one, but no, exactly that. We know which ones are good, and to be fair, when you look through the order, we did a track walk while the guys were on the grid, a pan through the field, and most of the liveries, to be fair to the guys, looked absolutely stunning. And the variety of it is fantastic. And Chaz, I know you were especially very happy to see custom liveries in for this season.
Yeah, it just helps the team stand out, gives them their own identities, and like you say, a lot of these guys put a lot of effort into these liveries to make sure that they look as good as they do. And one of wonderful things that we get in sim racing is the fact that these cars often, you can push the limits with liveries and sim racing. Speaking of pushing the limits, wow, Niles Nyox very close to the Jensen RJN car there, but they can do a lot more. Like we often say that you get what's known as a realistic livery when you see it on a sim racing car, because it's realistic in the way that a team could probably get away with doing it in real life. You know, a lot of effort can go into liveries, but sometimes teams need to think, are we going to put this much effort into a livery only for us to have to rewrap it when someone puts it in a wall? So you do often see that in sim racing they push the boundaries. They have these interesting metallic bits and matte bits and so on that you sometimes might not see on a real car. Of course, real livery represented on track in terms of the Jensen Team Rocket RJN McLaren, which Michael O'Brien is at the wheel of at the moment. Michael raced alongside James Baldwin, world's fastest gamer, in the British GT Championship this year in this car. I believe they were the number 2 car in the British GT this year, as he comes up to Variante Alta. But it's good to see Michael back. I mean, him and James were together in the last race in the World Cup, and they had a podium there, didn't they? They had a great job of racing around there. Yeah,
and you wouldn't really necessarily think, when you think of Kyle Lamy for the McLaren, but those guys, I mean, they were under pressure a lot throughout our course of the coverage, Chaz. They were under pressure from a few teams who were absolutely rapid, but they just held it together, and they just stayed consistent, stayed out of trouble, and that was the key to their success. So yeah, no, it was very impressive from these guys, and maybe it's just some of that real life experience, you know, dealing with the pressure. I mean, from my own personal experience, I find jumping on the sim grid or sim racing in general, one of the things, the biggest thing that you can take away from your real life racing experience is just being able to deal with that pressure and being able to spot things in terms of racecraft that you can capitalize on, that maybe people throughout the sim racing world just need to get a bit more experienced in. So that's, I think, the biggest takeaway or the biggest advantage that real life racers do have, is being able to spot, you know, when you can dummy someone, force them into a mistake, etc., something like that. But racecraft, yeah, and it played a part there. You've seen the way they cut through the field and cut through back markers through Kyle Lamy. Yeah, so it was very impressive, and now they look even more dangerous and surely have that confidence built towards this race here at Imola.
They do indeed. I just want to point out how close it is between everybody. This is the Yasheet car of Mikhail Stetsenko, currently fastest of 139.678. Now, I know that Connall said just beforehand that a 140 is a disgusting lap time and already ridiculously fast. These guys now into 139s, which is just pretty scary, to be fair. The top 19 cars are covered by just more than a second at the moment. It was just under that, and now it is again 942 thousandths of a second. Known to you as me is 0.9 seconds, covering the top 19 cars. There's certain cars, like if you look at 15th and 16th, 3 thousandths of a second between them. We've also got 3 thousandths of a second between 8th place and 9th place. That's Chodakis and Van der Kokel. And to be honest, only a 10th quicker than Kisser was Statsenko. But even still, when you look at how close the rest of the field is, that's actually really impressive to gain even a 10th on the car behind, isn't it?
Yeah, it was very interesting actually. We weren't covering it, but I was watching the Bathurst 2.4 hour on Thursday, and I think the top 20 were covered by a second, but then the leader, Rossini, in qualifying had a gap of 2/10. So, you know, I mean, that's just a huge amount. When you compare the top 20s covered by a second, when you've 2/10 over the next car, we're dealing with 2/10 being massive gaps here in the sim grid. That's what we're talking about. You know, normally when you see a massive gap in qualifying, you think half a second or, you know, 8/10 or even north of that. So to see 2/10 as a huge gap is ridiculous. And now we're looking at a 10th between Statsenko and Kisser and going, it's going to be tough to claw back.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you go to shorter circuits in sim racing and you see sub 1 minute lap times and you think, 2/10 there, that's a big gap. It's a bit of a moment running wide there for the Mercedes. But yeah, like you say, a 10th of a second, when we consider that a big gap, is just bonkers, and it's testament to how competitive it is. You can all see on the left-hand side that this event is pretty much sponsored by Mercedes. It's not really sponsored by Mercedes, but there's a hell of a lot of them out there. Got a BMW in the top 6, which is nice to see. Number 62 machine of Niels Noyox, racing for G2 Esports. As Van der Kokel decides to pop it into the pits. There's a Lamborghini out on track as well, or there's a couple of them. This is the GTWR Simulator Gian Truck machine, Giorgio Simonini. Now they've changed from the Audi, if I remember rightly.
No, they were Audi in the World Cup and their Lamborghini in the Endurance Cup.
Yes, that's me being an idiot. Apologies, everybody. But yes, the GTWR team, they're just one of those teams that have really proven themselves in the sim grid, aren't they?
Yeah, well, current championship leaders, I mean, Simonini and Cher looked absolutely unstoppable at Barcelona. And of course, World Cup winners at Kyalami was the GTWR team. Not having it all their own way so far in this qualifying session. I think this could be the possibly the first qualifying session they've been a part of where they will not be on the front row, which, well, as things stand, we know how they can pull it out of the bag, but I mean, when you've Giorgio Simonini and Jordan Sheridan in the car, you can really put the hammer down and gain those positions. I mean, we've seen how absolutely clinical they were at Barcelona. No one could touch them, and you know, to be fair, Simonini had to deal with a lot of pressure in his stint, and then he left Jordan with the lead, and as soon as Jordan got in that car with a race lead, he just cleared off and left it for Giorgio just to bring it home, really. So phenomenal performance from those guys at Catalunya, but hopefully, I mean, with Imola being such a compact sort of dogfight style track, we can see a bit more of a close battle for the lead.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be interesting to see how these Mercedes get on. Obviously, first time that we can compare them to the Lamborghini here on a broadcast between you and me anyway, and we've got them 1, 2, 3 and 4 at the moment. This is the other Lamborghini, the other GTWR Simulator Gian Truck machine of Thibaut Probst, 1:32. He's actually 5/10ths up on his fastest time at the moment, and this will show you how much this will gain you. Currently sat in 22nd place, goes for the line, up into 12th, 3 thousandths off the Audi ahead, the number 34 machine, and only 9 thousandths ahead of Fly, just behind him in the other Audi, the 144 car. And again, Connall, sometimes when you gain half a second, you do expect to move up the field quite a bit, but to go up that far just again shows us how close this is, doesn't it? Yeah,
exactly. And drivers will be seeing, they'll be putting in their personal best times they've ever put in. They'll be thinking, wow, what a lap, there's no way I'm going any way faster than that. And then they'll look at the real time on the bottom left of their screen, and they'll see their position just plummeting. And it's the double-edged sword is fantastic for us spectators to be watching this and how close it is. And of course, it's fantastic to be a part of these battles when you're a driver. But when you're driving, it's a double-edged sword, because you love being in a competitive battle against high-level drivers, but at the same time, you don't want to be having to deal with that pressure all racing, all qualifying session, knowing that if you mess up one lap, you can find yourself losing 3 or 4 positions. It's like, on a personal note, at Brands Hatch Indy before, we were out on track, and I think 37 of us were covered by 2 seconds, something to that effect. And I remember getting my pit board. Now, bearing in mind, Brands Indy is what, a 40-second lap, so I got my pit board and I was P5, and I come around the next lap and I check and I'm P14. So in the space of 40 seconds, look at the amount of positions. And it's a product of close racing, but I think for us neutrals, we wouldn't have it any other way.
Oh, definitely not. You always want it to be close, you always want it to be compact and exciting. And that's what we've had every race pretty much that we've covered on the sim grid. There's always been something to look at. There's always been something going on. We've got David Martinez in the race for Cat Mercedes. That's a gorgeous looking car. I don't think we had their full livery last time out at Catalunya, but that's a very good looking car. Interesting to see the difference between the original AMG GT3 and the GT3 Evo. You can see the back of the car looks a lot more aggressive. The headlights are a lot more aggressive as well, and just in terms of how the lights inside the headlight casing are shaped as well, and obviously the big mouth on the front of it. Still an aggressive looking car though, the original version, but just doesn't quite have that sharp and sort of refined look of the Evo. But that's why these manufacturers develop the later car, isn't it? They want it to be quicker. They want to basically make it so that it's as good as it can be. Rather than redevelop an entire car, they'd rather take what they've got already and make it even better. And to be honest, I think it's good to see these Evo versions of the cars, because it just gives a bit more life to a certain model, doesn't it? We've had it in GT racing for years where a manufacturer would run one type of car and then it's like, oh, we're bored of that now, let's make a new one. And while we do like the turnaround of getting very different cars, sometimes it's just nice to appreciate that development, isn't it, from one model to the next?
Yeah, it is. It's interesting if you're sort of an anorak or a bit of a tech geek when it comes to these cars, to just watch the evolution of these cars, and from the start of their development to the end of the development, see how they improve. And that's the part of the engineering aspect of motorsport that we love to see. So yeah, I'm all for Evo spec cars, and it's interesting. It's interesting to see how these guys. Obviously, they would have done a comparison test between the Evo and the original counterpart. I wonder if we could get actually any info from the guys who have switched to an Evo car as to, are they faster over the course of a lap, or is it a tyre management thing or a tyre life thing that they're finding is the biggest difference between the original and the Evo? It'd be interesting to get some information from them.
Yeah, a lot of the time underneath is where the major changes are made. Sometimes just the working components of the car, obviously. You don't always see a massive difference in terms of the aero from a physical perspective. I mean, the Mercedes probably, from one generation of car to its Evo counterpart, I'd probably say the Mercedes has the biggest visual change, just because of the fact that it's got that humongous grille on the front of it. The Bentley obviously went through a big iteration, but it was obviously the next model of Continental that they brought with it, I should say. So it had a lot more sharp edges on it. But I think the rear wing on that car is a real absolute beauty. We've had Garcia go up to second. He's within a tenth and a half now of Statsenko, but even just behind them, Kisser is just under 2/10 off the top spot. But then Niels van der Kokel is over 3.5 tenths off top spot as well. So there's a sudden dip there. It's like you have this sort of breakthrough just to get away from everybody else, and then it's like once you've got past that pace, you can just have this almighty pace of just getting something right. Lars Kisser is up on his time, I've been told. So he's coming around into the final couple of corners now, down towards the right, onto the brakes to straighten the car up. Two left-handers to go. Very deceivingly tight left-handers as well. They look like it's really open just because of the nature of the circuit here. On the throttle, out the final corner. Could very well get it here. He's got a 1:39.585 to beat. He's going to hug the wall to the right-hand side. Straightens the car up as much as possible. And what's it going to be? Oh, it's 90 thousandths off the top spot. Incredibly close. Niels van der Kokel is apparently 2/10 up as well. So right at the end of the session here, Connall, it's kicking off.
Yeah, we are having the last gasp. Everybody have set their banker laps. They've set their times that they've felt is relatively safe, but we can do something with this. And now it is just going for broke here. Niels van der Kokel, we know the quality of the Side Max Motorworks team. He is 2/10 up. Gregor Schill in the 888 car. He is also coming over the line. Currently 11th place in that Lexus. Niels van der Kokel comes over the line. He stays 4th, so he's lost that time. He was 2/10 up halfway around the line. What can the championship leaders do? They don't improve. They've bailed out of that lap time. So the championship leader's 7th on the grid. And I mean, it's very easy on this track to get into a dogfight. And once you get into a bit of a dogfight with the group, you can let the guys in front away quite easily, and then getting that time back, we can see how close the times are in qualifying. Getting that time back is very, very difficult around here because everyone is so close together. So yeah, it's an interesting prospect, the championship leaders being 7th on the grid.
And it's another highlight of how close this series is. It just shows how competitive it's going to be all season. And I think that we've got a few drivers and a few teams in there that they have this sort of moment in qualifying, don't they? Where they don't really look like they're going to be going that much quicker, and then they manage to do it. We have our very own David Perrell out there, of course, on circuit at the moment, just coming down into the final couple of corners, 17th at the moment in this Tech 1 Racing Lexus. Nice to see the Lexus well represented again around the final corner. Here's the Energy Racing Team Mercedes of Daniele Vidimari. We'll see whether David improves at all as well. Just keep an eye on the left-hand side of your screen. He does go across the line and he does not improve, unfortunately. But this Mercedes out the final corner, out the chicane at the top of the hill, very anti-alta, down towards the final couple of corners. Like I said, Connall, it's a very tricky part of the circuit because it's downhill, you're braking and the corner is still going downhill. The car feels like it washes away from you, and then all of a sudden you get to another left-hander where it's a bit more flat. So suddenly you've got more grip than you had in the corner before it. It's very sort of... It's really sort of disorientating when you get around there, isn't it? Because you suddenly got this grip when you turn in again. You're like, oh, that's where it went. As that's Luca Tavernari, just crossing the line there, 26, the second off the pace. And a very lively qualifying session for everybody then. And as we said, it's very difficult to get a lap in around here. You need to be careful of the track limits. There's a lot of runoff, a lot of curbs. Not too much gravel and grass to catch you out unless you really make a mess of it. So the guys there clearly just pushing as hard as they can. And we have our pole sitter. So it's all been decided. And there you go. Mikhail Statsenko goes fastest in the number 149 machine. Lars Kisser in second position. 5 Mercedes at the top, as has been pointed out. We've got Alberto Garcia and Niels van der Kokel. And then Dia McCormack and Giannis Georgakis in 6th place. Niles Noyox representing the BMW, I believe, in 7th. And just behind him, Lucas Cruiser. So, to be honest, looking at that there, Connall, I think we've got a recipe for a very good race. With how difficult overtaking is going to be around here, I think this is going to be a really, really good one, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just what you were saying there, Chaz, about the final 2 corners. It invites you into a pass when you try and go around the outside through the right kink downhill. You go around the long way, and then that sets you up for the inside into the tight left-hander. But it invites you into that pass, but at the same time, it's so difficult to make that pass. And when you do make that pass, well, there's not a lot of tarmac there, so either there's going to be a little bit of bumping or there's going to be a little bit of shoving the person out into the gravel, which could get somebody's blood boiling there. So, it's going to be a tough one, but again, we're probably going to see it very soon, how these guys manage with a pass down into Ravazza.
Yep, and that is where it's all going to come to a head, I'm pretty sure. But we'll see. It's always going to be feisty here on the sim grid. And what we'll be doing is joining you very, very soon for the 4 hours of Imola. Round 2 of the Endurance Cup here on the Sim Grid. We'll be right with you very soon. Keep an eye out on the Sim Grid's YouTube page. And of course, we'll be back with you in a little bit. From Chaz, Draycott and Courtney, Mike Yao on the broadcast and Michael Hamlet in the background. We'll see you soon.